Hello, and thank you for joining us again at Voice of Rohingya Radio. We are a registered nonprofit coming to you from the state of Oregon in the United States of America. We'd like to remind you to take a moment and join our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's an easy way to show your support for the program, and it allows us to continue providing the latest news through our exclusive interviews, reports from inside the border, and reputable sources from around the world. Voice of Rohingya Radio is the only news source of its kind in the English-speaking world, bringing you the latest news in a convenient format and keeping you informed and involved. You can listen to our program every week, Sundays at 6 p.m. Pacific Time, by visiting our new website at vorradio.org, where we'll keep you up to date with our past and future programs. It is January 25th, 2015. For Voice of Rohingya Radio, I am your host, Zach Taylor. I was recently able to talk with journalist and writer for The New Yorker and New Republic, among numerous other publications, and contributing editor to The Atlantic Monthly, Graham Wood, on his recent trip to Burma. Mr. Wood, thank you so much for joining me on the program.
My pleasure.
Would you mind describing for me your recent trip to Burma? In what capacity did you travel there, and what was your experience like?
I went to Burma as a journalist. I write for the New Republic magazine, and I was there on a grant from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum to find out the situation of the Rohingya on a trip of just a couple weeks.
I read in your article for the New Republic that you traveled to internally displaced persons camps for the Rohingya and the Arakanese. How did the camps differ in your impression?
Well, the main difference between the two camps was that the Arakanese camps were not prisons. They were a place where people could come and go, and in fact did. They'd go to work, and then they'd return to what really appeared to be a big row of longhouses. And it was considerably more free than you'd find if you went to the Rohingya side of the line.
I know that you also traveled to Burma back in 1998. How has the country changed since then?
The changes in the country are enormous. I was in Burma in 1998 and saw a very, very closed society, one that was certainly not ready to accept huge infusions of Western capital in particular. But even the connections with other parts of Southeast Asia and Asia more generally were quite limited technologically, and just in many ways in the spirit of the people. It was very difficult to have really strong connections between Burmese and the outside world then. Now, if you go back, the country is really roaring economically, and a lot of those connections are quite robust. So you could find ATMs coughing up money. You find evidence of business connections, and generally it's a country that's moved forward very fast economically.
So as Myanmar is being touted as a kind of U.S. diplomatic success story due to democratic reforms, you're saying the economic changes are more noticeable?
Certainly what's most visible is economic reform, and I wouldn't want to minimize the importance of that. Having those connections with the outside world is a very important aspect of reforming the country in subtler ways too. As for the political reform, obviously it has a long way to go, and to tout it as a success is at best simplistic. Clearly, what we have in the way of democracy in Burma doesn't resemble democracy as we'd apply the term in almost any other country. So quite a long way to go, but I do hope that it proceeds in deeper ways than just sham election.
So, Graham, I wanted to ask you, in your article you mentioned that an expatriate you spoke with said that the Myanmar government is using the Rohingya issue to politically outmaneuver Aung San Suu Kyi. What's your take on that comment?
I think it meant a lot of things. I mean, Aung San Suu Kyi's position right now as the godmother of democratic movement in Burma is really coming under assault by the kind of real political kind of requirements that she's meeting, and the fact that the Rohingya issue is one that really a very large majority of Burmese people they're willing to get behind the subjugation and in some cases even the expulsion of the Rohingya. So asking her to opine on that issue means really forcing her either to say something that is morally reprehensible or to say something that's politically unpalatable. It's a way for her to be put in a position of either losing friends abroad or losing them domestically. And it's a very difficult position to be in.
I was surprised by your observation of, maybe intrinsic is too strong a word, but deep-seated racism you wrote about. Could you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, I wouldn't really call it intrinsic. Of course, these things all have long historical roots, not to justify them, but to say that these things, they don't come out of nowhere and they're not immutable. That said, they seem to be very, very deep. It was not difficult at all to find people whose opinions of the Rohingya were they were motivated by deep racial animus and hatred. And you didn't have to go to ideologues or to crazy people to find these things, although those people were abundant as well. If you ask an average person in the street about the Rohingya, the opinion you're going to get is not going to be a nice one.
Would you say this racism was expressed on both sides of the fence, so to speak?
I certainly, well, no. It would be wrong to equate the opinions of each side, but there were certainly enormous amounts of distrust on the parts of Rohingya, of their former Buddhist neighbors, and there's been violence in both directions, of course. That said, overwhelmingly the Rohingya have been the victims in this case. So I wouldn't want to suggest that the hatred that I've heard from them would be equated to the more general hatred of the majority toward the Rohingya.
Mr. Wood, thank you so much again for speaking with me today.
Thanks for talking with me.
Once again, that was journalist Graham Wood speaking with me after his trip to Burma. You can read his article titled A Countryside of Concentration Camps on the New Republic website. You are listening to Voice of Rohingya Radio. Thanks again for tuning in to Voice of Rohingya Radio, a registered nonprofit from the state of Oregon in the United States of America, bringing you English language news concerning the Rohingya and other persecuted minorities in Myanmar. I am your host, Zach Taylor. Following a stinging rebuke by the United Nations human rights chief, Myanmar's ultra-nationalist Buddhist monk fired back Thursday, saying he didn't regret calling the UN Special Envoy a whore after she criticized a bill opposed to interfaith marriage and religious conversions. UN Special Rapporteur Yang Hee Lee had criticized several pieces of legislation proposed by a coalition of nationalist Buddhist monks, including a bill that would place curbs on interfaith marriage and conversions, saying they were discriminatory towards women and minorities and could inflame tensions. On Thursday, Warathu told the Associated Press when contacted by telephone that it was time for the international community to butt out of his country's internal affairs. It was nothing compared to the insult Miss Yang Hee Lee gave to our country, Warathu said. Warathu was jailed in 2003 for inciting anti-Muslim violence, but released in an amnesty 9 years later. Myanmar's Minister of Information and presidential spokesperson, Uye Tut, posted comments on his Facebook page indicating he would ask the Ministry of Religious Affairs to look into Warathu's speech. In other news, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Population, Refugees, and Migration, Ann C. Richard, today said the international community needs to put more pressure on Myanmar to resolve Rohingya issues, saying it is Myanmar's responsibility to take back its nationals. She made the remarks while talking to a select group of journalists after wrapping up her 4-day visit to Bangladesh. The U.S. Assistant Secretary, however, did not favor settling the Rohingya refugees to a third country. Our dream is to see that they are given a peaceful place to live. I know it is possible, but that's a dream, said Ann Richard, who came to Bangladesh for the first time. Rights groups are welcoming the release of a prominent Rohingya Muslim doctor who was arrested while trying to calm rioters during sectarian violence in western Myanmar. But they say scores of political prisoners remain behind bars. The case against Toon Aung, sentenced to 17 years in prison following what was considered to be an unfair trial, garnered widespread international attention. He was accused of inciting riots between Rohingya Muslims and Rakhine Buddhists in 2012, though activists and witnesses say he was a community leader and was asked by authorities to try and intervene. Myanmar has released more than 1,000 political prisoners since former military rulers handed over power in 2011. But Equality Myanmar Executive Director Aung Myo Min says that jails continue to be filled with peaceful protesters, journalists, and other dissenters. In other news, 4 dead bodies of unknown Rohingyas were found in the valleys of the mountains in southern Maungda yesterday, some Rohingya firewood gatherers said. The firewood gatherers believe that some armed Rakhine men have killed the people as they were crossing the mountains. Several Rakhine Buddhist model villages have been established on the confiscated lands of Rohingya in southern Maungda in the recent 2 decades. Of the villages, armed Rakhine extremists in the villages such as Kangri and Ma Rawadi have been notorious for committing crimes against the vulnerable Rohingya people with the cooperation of the military and the border guard police. Thanks again for listening to Voice of Rohingya Radio, a weekly news program bringing you up-to-date information about the Rohingya people in Myanmar. You can catch our broadcasts every Sunday at 6 p.m. Pacific Time here in the United States at youtube.com/VOR Radio, or you can join our page on Facebook to find more information on the program. For Voice of Rohingya Radio, this is Zach Taylor, signing out.